So next up, we have Emily Bush, and I'll go ahead and add you to our spotlight. Welcome. And they're going to talk about courageous conversations leading community discussions about media literacy. And Emily, you should be able to share as well whenever you're ready, or let me know if you need some help.
Okay, thank you. So let me make sure I choose the right one. Okay. So thank you for having me here today. I hope everyone is having a nice summer and you've had some time to relax during your summer. I am very excited to talk to you all today about a program that I took part in last fall, 23, Courageous Rhode Island, Courageous Conversations, which led to student-led discussions on media literacy topics. So to start off, I'll get into why now, which I think is kind of obvious. I debated whether to put that in the presentation at all, kind of preaching to the choir about media literacy. Then I'll go into the CRI curriculum and talk a little bit about these student-led conversations. Because speaking to a group of librarians, I feel like I could ask you all to write down a definition of media literacy, and you would all write down unique definitions that are all correct and different. Media literacy is this huge umbrella, which is why I like this infographic from Media Literacy Now that encompasses everything from digital wellness to data privacy, to just simply evaluating where information comes from. So unless you've been unplugged for the past 2 weeks, you are aware that media literacy has never been more important than it is now. This presentation has had leading up to it several huge media events, from the attempted assassination on Trump to Biden dropping out of the campaign, presidential campaign. And with those big events come lots of conspiracy theories and misinformation and disinformation. So we have this need to fill in the gaps with narratives when we don't have all the information that we're looking for. And there are no angels. There was mis and disinformation coming from the right and the left after the attempted assassination. But I say all this just to lay the groundwork for what I think everyone knows, that media literacy is extremely important leading into this election season. So I wanted to share these truths, I guess we can call them, from the News Literacy Project. Misinformation, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks, proliferates in proportion to curiosity and attention. So the bigger the event, the more likely you are to have lots of misinformation and disinformation floating around the internet and social media. And news coverage unfolds in real time, and reputable news organizations are trying to report information accurately, so perhaps slower than in the world of social media we want things to happen. And that allows opportunists to slip in and capitalize on that moment by spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories. So that's where the Courageous Rhode Island Courageous Conversations program comes in. It is a media literacy program that is aimed at reducing the hate that leads to violent extremism. It is an initiative of the Media Education Lab, which is how I, as a Tennessean, although the program is national, it's very much centered in Rhode Island, came to know about the program. If you're familiar with Renee Hobbs, who I'm kind of like a fangirl of, to me, she's like the media literacy educator. She's the founder of Media Education Lab. And I should point out that this program is funded by a grant from the Department of Homeland Security. So the Courageous Rhode Island curriculum provides you with all the materials you need to lead these conversations yourself or have students lead them, which I'm a big proponent of. So I wanted to share some of the topics that are in this toolbox. The first one, why media literacy matters, really just gets into the nuts and bolts of media literacy. As librarians, we tend to toss around words like media literacy, information literacy, AI literacy, and we know what these terms mean. But in general, I would say that people don't really think about media literacy. So this would be a great one if you're introducing the idea to a new group of people. There's a lesson on preventing violent extremism, high conflict online. Is there good conflict online? Conflict entrepreneurs, which I think is a really interesting one. This idea that there is an incentive to people online to create conflict. The old saying, there's no such thing as bad PR, holds true in a social media environment. Feelings and facts dives into conspiracy theories, our need to have narratives to explain the events of the world, leading to a rise in conspiracy theory thinking. The influencers, how social media is reshaping people's decisions about who and what to trust. Increasingly, people are seeking their news rather than from traditional news outlets from a single person that they feel like they trust online. Free speech, hate speech, and censorship. This is the conversation that my fellows chose to use for 2 out of 3 of their conversations. It centers on who should be regulating speech online. Should it be the tech companies? Should it be the people? Should it be the government? Should anyone? And then finally, targets of propaganda. So who is being targeted to receive harmful propaganda? And something that we don't talk about a whole lot is there good propaganda? So each lesson has a wealth of tools to help you put together these conversations on your campus or in your community. Everything from lesson plans, and I'll note that the lesson plans, if you wanted to use them in some of your information literacy instruction, they have plans for 15-minute lessons, plans for hour lessons, so to fit all sorts of needs. They have slide decks, they have scripts to go along with the slide decks, which was really great for the students, and they liked having that. They have video summaries, discussion questions, so everything under the sun to make this easy to implement. So going back to the Courageous Rhode Island professional development that I took part in back in fall of 23, as part of that program, we had a thought partner or a partner that we would work with to develop a lesson plan to implement using the curriculum. So my partner was a middle school instructional coach out in Coalinga, California, which I'm not familiar with that area of the country. So we thought it would be really cool to have the college students lead a discussion with the middle school students. So this idea that maybe college students could relate better to these Gen Alpha middle schoolers than Josh or I could. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. But this idea of cross-generational media literacy discussions led me to create the fellowship that these students took part in. At Vanderbilt Libraries, we have this Buchanan Fellowships program, which gives librarians a lot of flexibility to develop a seminar-style course that provides experiential learning around library resources and services. So my fellowship was enhancing civic engagement across the generations through media literacy education. And the real heart of the fellowship was the discussions that I knew that I wanted students to lead. But a requirement was also to have a deliverable, and the students' deliverable was any sort of media object they wanted to create that promoted how media literacy can enhance civic engagement. So there are 3 conversations that I had set up and 3 fellows. And I was thinking that they would each lead a conversation, but they had a better idea. They wanted to lead all of the conversations. So our 3 conversations were with a high school, a senior center, and the middle school. And we started with the University School of Nashville, which is a private K-12 school, which is conveniently located right across the street from the main library at Vanderbilt, because our students did not have transportation. So we just walked across the street, and we had an existing partnership there. These are, private school students. They're high achieving. It was very much like a peer-to-peer conversation, which I thought would be a good starting point, because one of the things that I really emphasized was being able to change the curriculum based on the audience. So what better than, what better group to start with than peers, because they're going to know the right pop cultural references to insert into that presentation. So we had a lunch and learn with about 25 students. So pretty good turnout for optional with high schoolers. There was free pizza, so that may have played a role. The second conversation was at the Center for Older Adults, 50 Ford. And one of the fellows couldn't make it to this, but because of the transportation issues, I drove them out there. So that is a consideration if you're doing a community talk, whether the students have transportation and what sort of transportation you have in your community. Nashville's public transportation is lacking. So I drove them out there, and we had a lively conversation. Ahead of the 50 Ford discussion, we had the director of the centers talk to the students about some considerations for and speaking with older adults, and some of the things we talked about, some of the memes and references in the presentation, since memes are very much like a dog whistle for the in-group, trying to think of something that would have a broad audience rather than something that only 2 people in the room might get. We also talked about some of the vocabulary in that free speech presentation, like deplatforming was a term that many of the seniors were not familiar with. So they took a little bit more time giving really high profile examples, like Trump being kicked off Twitter, that hopefully more people would be familiar with. And then the final conversation was with the middle schoolers. And this one had a lot of logistical issues because they're much like this conference. We're in Central Time, and they were out in California in Pacific Time. So between that and class schedules, we ended up having an asynchronous conversation on Flip. And we used the Why Media Literacy Matters curriculum. We didn't think the free speech, hate speech, and censorship would, we thought it was a little too advanced for 11 and 12-year-old students. So they were journalism students at this school, and the fellows all chose a piece of media that they thought, the middle schoolers would enjoy or think was funny. We were trying to get something, that they would be drawn to. So I think 2 out of 3 were memes. The middle schoolers worked in groups to answer the 5 key questions of media literacy, which are here on the screen. So who is the author? What is the purpose? What techniques are used to hold your attention? What lifestyles, values, and points of view are represented? How might different people interpret the message? And what is omitted from the message? And then the college students chimed in one more time to provide feedback on the middle schoolers' analysis. So not quite as great as an in-person discussion, but I actually think it worked really well for the middle school audience. One of the things that Josh, the instructional coach at the middle school, and I had discussed is that he thought the students might freeze up on Zoom and not really want to discuss because it can be hard to get discussions going on Zoom. So the asynchronous nature, I think, actually played in the favor for this particular audience. So because these fellowships are grounded in experiential learning, the fellows had to submit reflections. So I wanted to share just a few of those. The student had a newfound appreciation for how people's lived experiences influence their outlook on media literacy's broader implications. And this student who missed the conversation at the senior center focused on the intergenerational conversations with the younger generations and how it reaffirmed their belief that media literacy is really important as a skill that should be taught throughout life. And then this final student said, this journey didn't just make me more knowledgeable about the importance of media literacy education. It inspired me to continue this work outside the fellowship through conversations with friends, family, and peers. Importantly, being a fellow was more than just discussion and learning, it was action. And I really liked that last part of what they said, the idea of being out there and taking action. I was a little bit worried because some of the students had to skip class in order to lead these discussions, but ultimately, you know, it's more of a life experience than sitting in a classroom. I also liked that they mentioned this idea of what CRI talks a lot about as the ripple effect. So as we have these conversations in the community promoting the civil discourse, the hope is that there will be a ripple effect where the people who are part of the conversation then continue it with others. So a few quick tips. If you're thinking about potentially implementing these, and if you're looking to implement them before the November election, kind of have to act quick depending on when your college goes back into session. But I recommend looking at existing partnerships. So organizations that you already have a relationship with in the community. If you don't have any community relationships, maybe looking at student groups that might have an interest in media literacy. I've always thought that it would be fun to get the campus Democrats and Republicans together for something like this. And then let students take the lead. They'll really surprise you. I just showed students the curriculum and let them pick what was of most interest to them. And 2 out of the 3 were pre-law, so they were very interested in free speech. I'm probably more familiar with some of the other topics, but they did a great job. And then there's a planning guide on the CRI website, which I will pull up here at the end of the presentation, that takes you through the who, what, when, where, and why. So if you can, partners really maximize success. So thinking about partnering with a student organization or a community organization. Then choose a conversation if you're comfortable with it. Let students choose what interests them. That intrinsic motivation will get them far. Choose a date and time, which seems really simple, but I found gets really complicated around student class and work schedules. And then choose a location. As I mentioned, transportation was an issue for students. If you're on a residential campus, for students don't necessarily have cars, and in a city that doesn't have great transportation, you might have to consider doing virtual. And then the why, I feel like, is pretty obvious. It's never been more important our information landscape just keeps getting more and more complicated. I've been interested in media literacy for a very long time, and it almost seems quaint to think about where social media was in like 2007 versus what it has become and what a driver in society it has become for influencing elections. Maybe someone imagined it, probably. But if you are interested, this is the web address, and I'll put it in the chat as well. If you do have hold a courageous conversation, see if I can type and talk. They like them to be registered so they can track it. So there's also a program registration that's on the website as well. And Renee Hobbs and Pam Steger, who head up the program, are happy to sit down and talk with you about the planning process. And I'd love to hear from you as well. Or if you have any questions about what I did, my email is here on the screen.
Thank you so much, Emily. There are a few questions in the chat that we're going to go over for the next 4 minutes or so. And some of these you might have already answered, so feel free just to kind of click if you want to. What is the age audience of the curriculum?
The curriculum is aimed towards a general audience that wouldn't have a lot of previous knowledge about media literacy. So I felt like we needed to adjust it a bit for the middle school audience and for the senior audience, but it's kind of just a general adult audience.
And do students have to get parent or legal guardian permission? How do you recruit those participants?
The college students, well, the answer is the same. It was no for us on both sides, for the college students and the middle school students. It was just a matter of the teachers agreeing to it.
Just checking to see if there are any other questions in the chat. Don't see any coming in right now. Just check. We have some resources that Esther put in there for California media literacy.
Yeah, I see that. That's great. That's really on the forefront. There's very few states with any media literacy curriculum.
Okay, hold on. I think there might actually be a couple of other questions that are shared here. Give me just 1 second. Okay, oh, here's a good one. Were there any conversations that surprised you between the generations?
Yeah, I was really surprised with the conversation at the seniors center. The seniors were more into TikTok than I had anticipated. I'm not on TikTok, and I'm like an old millennial. But kind of they were knowledgeable about TikTok, but then we did have to explain deplatforming, and they were really into the conversation, really engaged, and enjoyed having the college students come out. They were very concerned about their teenage grandchildren.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. There is another question here that is in the document that they linked to. And sorry if they missed this, but how did you choose a school in California since, you're out in Tennessee? How did you might have already explained this, but.
Yeah, I don't know if I explained it well. As part of the professional development course that I took part in with Media Education Lab, we were partnered with people, and we had the choice to either create a partnership or just be thought partners. And I was partnered with the middle school instructional coach, and we just really wanted to make a true partnership happen. So using Flip is how we did it.
Awesome. Well, we are right at time, maybe 30 seconds or so to spare. So just before, we're going to take a break for a few minutes here. We do encourage everyone, there's in the chat the link to the Lilly posters. We have some excellent posters in there, and we want to give everyone some time to go in, watch those posters, ask questions, pose comments, whatever you have. But thank you so much, Emily. This was a great presentation. We appreciate your time today and sharing what's happening. This is really wonderful. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, everyone. Like I said, we're going to take a